Welcome to the session from Funding to Impact, Leveraging Data to Accelerate Homelessness Reductions. So I've already said good morning, but I'm also going to say bonjour. I'm going to say hi, the kind of traditional greetings in Montreal that I think everyone has been used to. I also want to say sego, which is a Kanengiahaga greeting. And to start, I want to acknowledge that we're on the land called Jogjagge. In the Kanengiahaga language, it's also called Munyang in Anishinaabe-Bowen. This island has long served as a site for meeting and exchange amongst many First Nations, including the Kanengiahaga of the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, Abenaki, and Anishinaabeg. And thank you again for being here this morning. There's a seat up front if you want to come. So we're going to get started with introductions, and the session is in English, but we also have interpretation if you need to go get headsets. And yeah, now I'm going to pass it to Lauren for her introduction. Kelsey, sorry, my bad. Can we get the mics?
Is it working now? Oh, great. Hi, everyone. My name's Kelsey McKibben, Community Investment Lead at the Home Depot Canada Foundation. I lead our grants and our measurement and evaluation work. I'm joining you today from Toronto, though our work spans all across Canada, supporting youth-serving charitable partners. Quick note about the Home Depot Canada Foundation. We are the charitable foundation behind the Home Depot Canada's community investment efforts. We are committed to preventing and ending youth homelessness and have pledged $125 million to be invested by 2030, and we're already more than halfway there. Through grants and partnerships with community organizations and youth-serving charitable partners, we invest in housing, employment, life skills, and wraparound supports. Today, I'll be walking you through how our funding strategy has evolved through working with Blueprint to develop our evidence strategy, and how measurement and evaluation framework has really helped us understand what we're funding. We're using data not just to track progress, but to shape conversations, elevate frontline voices, and really guide where we go next.
Good morning, everyone. My colleague Rua and I were joining from Blueprint, and Blueprint is a nonprofit research organization. We work closely with governments, funders, and other nonprofits to support them with evaluation, data collection, and generating evidence that can inform program and policy development, program and policy improvements. And we work really closely to support our partners to not just collect evidence, but really how to best use it to support and inform their work and make decisions and strengthen programs. So we were founded in 2017 and over the years have developed expertise in 4 kind of core program and policy areas, among them being housing and building solutions that increase access to safe, affordable housing, reducing homelessness, supporting housing stability, and accelerating pathways to rehousing. So we've been working closely with Kelsey and the Home Depot Canada Foundation for a few years now around their evidence strategy, which we're excited to talk a bit more about today. And then for myself, my name is Lauren Kupcho. I'm a senior associate at Blueprint. I've been involved in the work with Kelsey and the foundation since it started. So excited to share more about that. And I'm joined by my colleague Rua, who will introduce herself.
Thank you, Lauren. So hi, everyone. My name is Royal Jade. I am also a senior associate at Blueprint based in Toronto. Similar to the description that Lauren described, that covers a lot of the work that I do, but I also have a portfolio around building data capacity for both the sector at large and nonprofit organizations. So in order to be able to do this work, we need to learn about what the work is and how to improve it. And so we think about, the data behind it, the stories behind it, and how to drive meaning from it and move from learning to from compliance to learning. So that's sort of what I've been doing with the Home Depot Foundation, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. But I'll pass it to Florian and Mitch.
Yeah, so just a quick introduction about CAEH. So CAEH is a national movement of individuals, organizations, and communities working together to end homelessness. So movement of all of you all in the room. And we're working to do this through support with several allied networks, data and policy work to help inform advocacy campaigns, and of course the annual conference and other key initiatives. So my name is Florian. I'm a data advisor, and Mitch, you can give a quick introduction too.
Yeah, hi. Hello, everyone.
Oh.
Hello, everyone. I'm Mitch Deacock. I'm a data lead at the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness. Excited to be here.
And with that, let's get into the challenge.
Okay, so in the spirit of learning, we want to make sure we're all on the same page around, what are we seeing the challenge are, and please think about if this resonates with you. If it doesn't resonate, we'd love to learn from you as well. And so I want to start by naming something that probably feels familiar to the folks that are in this room. Across the sector, we're collecting more data than ever. Every program, every grant, every system has its own reports, dashboards, forms, and we do this because we care about understanding what is working. But most of that data ends up describing what was done, not what changed. So we count workshops, we count youth served, hours even, but it's much harder to see how those efforts are actually shifting someone's path or strengthening a system or building capacity over time. And because it's hard to know what will truly show impact, we end up measuring everything. So the intention is good. We want to capture the full story, but the result is that data often starts to feel tedious, heavy, and disconnected from the work that it's meant to illuminate. So what was previously meant to help us learn has in some ways become one more task to manage, something that we do for accountability, not necessarily with curiosity. And so that's the pattern that we've been noticing, not just in the homelessness sector, but across the nonprofit and public sectors more broadly, though I will talk about how that impacts our sector specifically. So I'd love to get a quick sense of how this lands with you. You can scan the QR code or use the code. There's like a code under the slide to join Mentimeter. So if you go to menti.com, just pull out your phones. You'll see that there are 3 short questions about who's in the room, what kind of data you're collecting, and how you're using it. I'm just going to switch screens so we can actually go through the questions one by one and just kind of get a sense to engage with you and see if this resonates. So I'm just going to switch to that. And if you missed it, don't worry, it will also pop up on the... Is it showing the screen? Yes. There you go. Okay. And I can see that folks are already starting to answer the questions. So it seems like most of our audience are here today is service delivery organizations. So I have some theories around whether or not what I just said is going to land with the folks that are in this room based on who's here. But a lot of government, a lot of funders. We definitely want to learn from funders in the room. We have a lot of curiosities about how you're doing things and if we can, maybe share lessons and experiences. So really exciting to see that. Next question, we were very curious on what types of data you captured. So I talked about in the challenge how we're really in this space, we're collecting activities, not necessarily changes. And so we want to know, is that true for you? Are you collecting outcomes? Are you collecting what changes? Or similarly, are you mostly collecting, just what is happening? So I can see many of the folks are entering demographics and reach, service access and engagement, program or service outcomes is increasingly popular. So that might be a reflection of, the type of thought that's already happening within this room. So that's very exciting. So I'll stop sharing my screen. Feel free to, continue to answer those questions. It's really interesting for us to see these results, but I'll go back to the presentation just to get into what are the contributing factors around what creates this challenge that we're talking about. So from current slide. Okay, so yeah, I want to just pause and reflect on why there's this mismatch between what we collect and what we learn and how it keeps showing up, especially here in the homelessness serving sector. So if we zoom out, one of the big drivers is at the system level. So if you think of the many different streams of work, the many touch points across housing, shelters, health, justice, community services, Indigenous supports, all of them are collecting different pieces of information, but because data lives in silos, no one really gets to see the full picture of progress. So another part of the system challenge is that people are moving from program to program, re-entering supports in a different context. And so the tracking of outcomes often breaks down in those transitions. So even when someone is making progress, we might lose sight of it because our systems weren't necessarily designed to follow that story. So now at the organizational level, I did see that there was a lot of service delivery organizations in this room. So hopefully this is kind of speaking to your experience. There are real demands. Data work often happens off the side of our desk, in the quiet hours, after service delivery, or during reporting windows. And so we know that teams are delivering, supporting, caring, but then on top of that, we ask them to collect, to clean, and submit. So there's little time that's left to pause and ask, what does this actually tell us? And so how do we take this into action? So there's the feedback loop. The insights rarely flow back to the people that are doing the work, the frontline staff, the program leads, even the participants. And so instead of the data becoming a source of reflection and improvement, it becomes something that we do for accountability instead of with curiosity. So we have systems that are fragmented and organizations that are time poor, and the result is a gap between what's being recorded and what's being understood. And so given the homelessness context specifically, where the paths people take are often non-linear, where success can mean many different things, so stability, reconnection, this gap matters. We risk overlooking meaningful shifts because our data systems weren't built for this complexity. And so the good news is that in naming these contributing factors, the system fragmentation, the capacity constraints, the feedback loops, we're pointing towards where things can change. And so we're not saying, everything is broken. We're saying there are crucial levers here. And as I go into the next slide, I want to invite us to think about, the shift that we're exploring together. That's kind of what we're going to get into today. And so I'm going to introduce that in a moment. How do we start to turn data from a burden into an actual bridge to learning? And so thinking back to what we just named, the fragmentation at the system level and the capacity and feedback gaps within organizations, it becomes pretty clear that we can't address one without the other. So for real progress, we need both of these systems and organizations to be healthy, to be learning together, to be able to see and respond to what's actually happening on the ground. And this is what we mean by the shift. So moving from data as a reporting exercise to data as a shared language that connects our work. So on the organization side, that means building capacity, helping teams use data in ways that are meaningful and doable. It's not about, perfect systems or endless indicators. It's about giving people time, tools, support, to pause and ask, what are we learning here? Even just asking questions or choosing indicators that also resonate with organizations so that they are collecting quality data that they can actually use for learning. And then at the systems level, it's about bringing visibility. Data can be really powerful in that way. Once we name something, once we make it visible, we can't really look away from it. And so it validates what people are experiencing. It tells the truth about where we're making progress and where we're stuck. And it allows us to respond together instead of in silos. And I think that's what's really powerful about bringing together at this conference today, seeing, the challenge from all these different angles and then coming together to share our experiences. So we're a little bit more coordinated and can bring visibility to what was previously invisible. So when we start to use data in that way, it becomes less about compliance and more about coordination. So it's a way for funders, nonprofits, communities to move in the same direction, even if we all have different roles to play. So that's the work that my colleague Lauren and I have been doing alongside the Home Depot Canada Foundation, looking at how to make this shift real within their granting approach, how a funder can support learning and accountability without losing the flexibility that makes trust-based relationships work. And then after that, we'll hear from Mitch and Florian at the CAEH, who will bring the systems perspective through the Homelessness Reduction Innovation Fund. So while we haven't worked with you closely on that, I'm very excited to learn. I've already learned some very interesting things and some overlaps in our work, just showing how communities can use data to track progress in real time and see changes as it's happening. So together, these two case studies show that this shift isn't abstract. It's already underway. We're learning how to make data lighter, more useful, and more connected, not for the sake of more reporting, but for the sake of shared learning. So really excited to pass it to Lauren and Kelsey to get us into what we've been learning.
Thank you. Okay, great. So I just wanted to share a bit more about our purpose, approach, and some of our strategic priorities. It worked last time. Maybe I can also just go up. There we go. Okay, so since 2013, we have focused exclusively on preventing and ending youth homelessness in Canada. Our approach and our funding model is intentionally flexible and low barrier. That means organizations can use funds to meet youth where they are and respond to local and emerging needs. We prioritize trust, responsiveness, and learning in how we work with partners. And I will also mention we define youth as ages 12 to 29 and really focus on integrated youth-centered solutions, funding programs that are addressing multiple areas of need. We made a strategic plan to take us from 2022 to 2030 and built it around 3 pillars. So the first, I'm only going to read the 3 on here, although our 4th is grow the Home Depot Canada's foundation role in the homelessness sector. But for the first, strategic wraparound support. So we fund prevention programs, shelter diversion, life skills development, systems coordination, and family mediation. Our second is expand stable housing. We invest in transitional housing, renovations, individualized supports, including capital, operational funding, as well as case management and house connection work. And then preparing youth for employment. So we support programs that offer vocational training, job placements, and employment education support to help youth build skills and overcome employment barriers. These priorities really guide how we allocate funding and how we support organizations working across the youth homelessness sector. Okay, so how do we fund these priorities? I wanted to share a bit about our 3 granting streams. First, we have our strategic partnerships. This is our largest grant stream, reaching over 17,000 youth. These are multi-year investments that support systemic change and innovation in housing, prevention, and employment. Next, we have TradeWorks. This is our most intensive stream, reaching over 300 youth for career education and skilled trades training. Youth receive an average of 60 hours of programming with high completion rates, and the outcomes here are really focused on employment, skills development, and long-term stability. While the cost per youth is higher, the transformation is really significant, and this stream focuses on those innovative, tailored employment pathways. Finally, our Youth Opportunity Grants. This stream supports around 2,500 youth and is designed to expand access and equity. These are smaller grants, but they often fund 80 to 100% of a project's budget, enabling services that might not otherwise happen. It's our most flexible stream, allowing us to respond annually and broadly to emerging needs, local gaps, and equity-focused initiatives. Okay, so now a bit about our why into this journey. So we've long known that we needed a clearer way to analyze our impact across all streams, not just to count services delivered, projects funded, youth supported, but to understand our role in the broader youth homelessness ecosystem. And we also knew the value that data provides. You know, having this evidence could better help us make better granting decisions and validate our decisions in the solutions that we're funding. And it can also help us improve how we tell this story across stores and to customers, for fundraising, and for other general awareness for other funders and even service providers. Okay, right, so we knew our strengths, being flexible, low barrier with minimal reporting, and being a trust-based funder. However, we were also facing some real challenges. We were one step away or removed from delivery, so we fund the work, but we don't necessarily deliver it ourselves. Learning about our impact requires others to collect and share data, and that can be burdensome and sensitive. And so we had to ensure our approach was relevant to our partners as well. And we also knew that doing this work would require time and resources. We wanted to move away from the output-driven model toward one that helps us respond more thoughtfully, support more effectively, and build trust through shared insight. So when Blueprint came in, the goal was clear: find ways to learn about our work and impact without adding unnecessary burden on our partners. This is a quick highlight of our 2024 data from our 2024 year in review. It is available online on our website if you'd like to read the full report. But I really just wanted to show a quick snapshot of, number of youth engaged, grants awarded, dollars invested. This is kind of the same kind of information that we've always tracked, and I think it's common to track and present these data points. It definitely is helpful because it helps us understand our reach, our scale, and delivery. But we also know that outputs alone don't tell the full story because it's really showing kind of what was done, but not what changed. And previously, we relied on Excel sheets and data pulls from our internal tracking from our application software, but this didn't analyze our impact across all streams, let alone showcase how all of it adds up to measurable change in the sector. All right.
Okay. Is the mic? Yeah, the mic's on. Okay. So when Blueprint came in to start this work with the Home Depot Canada Foundation, like Kelsey mentioned, it was really important that we kept flexibility and that kind of low barrier approach at the center of how we'd go about evaluating their grants. We didn't want to lose what we knew was working well for them already as a funder. And they built their identity around being this kind of low barrier, flexible funder. That needed to be kind of also really important to maintain through this process. So the very first thing we did when we started this work is we underwent a process to really learn more about the foundation's context so we could build a strong understanding of how their grants worked, who they're reaching, and ultimately build an approach that really fit the unique context of all of the granting partners that they fund. So this involves speaking with foundation staff, their board members, donors, suppliers, as well as granting partners directly. And especially from the granting partner perspective, we knew this was really critical because we knew that we needed to understand the data that they're already collecting about their work so we could really see where that alignment between the Home Depot Foundation's goals and priorities, as well as kind of theirs, were all really clear, and that we could identify where that existed so we could really build on that. And build a strategy that could still work well across these very different contexts and keeping in mind different levels of data capacity and the broad portfolio that the Home Depot Canada Foundation has. So from this process, what we learned is that really outputs are very commonly tracked. Everyone was tracking outputs and activities. That was consistent across the board. Whereas outcomes were not consistently tracked. Yes, some were tracking them, but definitely not as consistently. And, this wasn't very surprising to us, but it was something that was important for us to confirm before we really went through the process of building out a reporting framework. And we could ensure that the priorities of the framework were reflected and aligned with partners. So in this reporting approach that kind of has come through this process, partners do submit reports now at the end of their grants, just like any other reporting process. But the way we've structured it has really sought to keep things flexible, adaptable, and still low burden to partners. So essentially how this happens is, the indicators we developed are intentionally quite broad, but partners are only reporting on a smaller selection of those indicators that they identify at the start of their grants as early as the application stage. And they choose from a list of required and optional indicators based on what is relevant to their project specifically. So things that we knew they were already tracking. So those outputs were more required as relevant, whereas the optional indicators were more around those outcomes. So, and those were only, collected if it was relevant to the project, but also took into consideration and, whether they have the capacity to actually collect and report that back to the foundation. So this is what keeps the reporting tailored to each project's goals and context, and build on what data the partners are already collecting, rather than asking them to for information that's either completely new to them or really narrowly aligned with the funders' priorities. So in practice, what this means is that partners with more data capacity can certainly collect that data and share it back with the foundation. They certainly want to know it. It's still important, but those with less, really only need to focus on what's feasible for them. So this is really what keeps the process flexible, adaptable, and low burden, while at the same time ensuring the foundation can learn meaningfully from the data coming in about what is being funded and what's happening on the ground. Next slide. So since developing the strategy, we've spent the last couple of years putting it into practice with the foundation's granting streams, and it has been quite a big shift, going from little to no reporting to now collecting and using quite a bit of data. We've really tried to take a really mindful approach around how we go about this. So this slide kind of overviews what that process has looked like. And what I just want to highlight here is, first, how we've worked to really engage and support partners as much as possible as we've started to roll this out. And also, secondly, how we've embedded learning into every stage. So early on, we developed tools and resources intended to support granting partners, to help clarify expectations, explain what each indicator means, and outline what the process would look like from start to finish. We piloted the approach with a smaller group of partners first, so we could really learn, where we need to adapt things or strengthen things before we kind of rolled it out with the full granting partner groups, like all of the foundation's granting streams. And so as we've been implementing it more broadly, we've built in lots of opportunities for learning and reflection. We've done a lot of sense-making sessions and workshops with Kelsey and her team, just to work through what we're learning about the data that's coming in, what we're hearing about how the processes are working for partners, and ensure that that the data has meaning, it has utility, and really can support decision-making for the foundation from the beginning. And, we've been engaging with partners along the way for feedback on how we can make the process better. We fully recognize that this has been an adjustment for the foundation's granting partners. We're doing what we can to make things as smooth as possible, but it has also been a huge adjustment for the foundation to go from not having a lot of this information and now having it, and learning how to best interpret and use that data effectively. So, ultimately as a funder, doing this well is so much more than just asking partners to submit another survey or another report, but making sure they're adequately informed and supported, and that we can be flexible in how we, make changes to the process so that, that low burden kind of priority is maintained all at the same time. Next slide, please. Okay, so remember one of the challenges that Kelsey outlined early on. When we started this work, the foundation was grappling with how to best measure and attribute impact to their granting. And this is certainly tricky, not just for the foundation, but really any funder. You want to know your investments are making a difference in a meaningful way. So before this work started, the foundation had been primarily looking at youth outcomes and asking, how much of this can we attribute to our grants? But as we've been implementing the strategy, we've spent a lot of time really trying to unpack what impact really looks like for a funder, and specifically for the Home Depot Foundation. One of the big questions we're talking about a lot is that question of attribution versus contribution. So, what does the Home Depot Foundation directly influence versus what do they kind of contribute to or contribute to indirectly? And this conceptual model really helped to make that clear for us, and shows that, of course, we know that the foundation doesn't directly deliver programs or services, but they do enable programs and services through funding. which means that their impact is much broader than just looking at youth outcomes. And that's not to say that youth outcomes aren't important or aren't part of the picture. They certainly are, but they just don't capture that full range of how a funder can be impactful, or even just how the foundation should be thinking about success for themselves. So this really helped to clarify that the foundation's impact happens through its partners by building capacity and giving them funds that enable strong program delivery. But this really laid the groundwork for developing a theory of change and to make those pathways of influence and impact more explicit and more measurable. So this slide has a little snapshot. It's a little far, but a little snapshot of the foundation's theory of change that we developed with Kelsey and her team. And what it really shows is how the foundation's grant-making influences change at different levels. So it really starts, like I mentioned a moment ago, with building the capacity of granting partners. And this is done specifically through first, receiving the funding, and that supports partners' ability to deliver effective programs, offer more supports, and therefore increasing the availability of supports, of housing and employment readiness services, kind of aligned with those strategic pillars. And then from there, those organization level changes support greater access and opportunities for youth, so allowing them to engage in more tailored, effective programs and supports. And then as youth access those programs, that's when you start to see the early outcomes for youth. Things like increased confidence, stability, skills, and more opportunities to secure and maintain housing. And so now that impact pathway is very clear and more clearly defined, we're able to analyze and interpret the data that's coming in through these new processes in a way that truly reflects the foundation's role in the ecosystem and how it contributes to change at different levels. And so we've been using this theory of change throughout this process of implementing the evaluation strategy to validate and strengthen the relevance and the quality of the data coming in, and just making sure it's really linked strongly to outcomes that are both measurable, meaningful and realistic for the foundation. It's also guided how we've been interpreting and making sense of the data that is coming in. And it has really been helpful to have a shared framework for learning. Right now, mostly used internally with the foundation team, but also with the intention of supporting broader ecosystem level conversations about, where there's progress being made, where the challenges are in the sector, kind of over time. That is a use that we also see for this.
Yeah, I could also add, this theory of change really helps us outline that middle work that needs to be done in terms of reaching our goal of ending youth homelessness. We had our strategic plan, but this really brings in everything that's needed in the middle to show us about how we define our work, how it's contributing to those long-term outcomes, and really directly linking those outcomes that we're tracking to the indicators that we're asking partners to report on. So yeah, it really acts as a guide for us. We reference back to it as a tool to learn and adapt all the time. It helps us prompt inquiry about, some of those real-time emergencies and shifts, but also it enables us to really be proactive and to anticipate gaps, invest wisely, and really stay accountable to the youth and the communities and the organizations that we serve. Okay, so what we're learning about our role, we're very excited. We have our 2024 data analysis complete, and so this is kind of now about what we're learning about some of those reports that we're getting back. And so first, for the takeaways, we have learned that our funding builds partner capacity, which in turn strengthens the ecosystem, and together this evidence helps us inform and improve our role as a funder committed to ending youth homelessness. The data is showing us that our funding is helping organizations maintain operations, address service gaps, and respond to emerging needs, particularly where traditional funding is limited. Across our granting streams, we're seeing distinct types of impact. System-level change for holistic wraparound supports, new partnerships emerging, and innovative solutions being piloted and even scaled. And then if you recall, earlier in our presentation, I shared 3 of our granting streams. And so the data is also showing that each funding stream offers a unique lens. So we have our strategic partnerships and trade works, and those both streams are really illustrating the contrast between scale and depth. Broad system shifts versus targeted individual outcomes. And then for our youth opportunity grant, those are really surfacing trends in equity and innovation as partners experiment with some of those new models. And then together, these distinctions help us assess cost effectiveness, engagement, and impact across varied approaches, and is really helping us inform, some more intentional investment decisions. And then specifically for our youth-specific outcomes, we're seeing youth developing the foundational capacities identified in the evidence theory of change that Lauren was mentioning. And so things like increased confidence, employability, life skills, and housing stability, which validates our funding decisions rooted in solutions, which we're very excited about. And so for our takeaway through all of this is that our investments are supporting effective programs, and we are very excited to be able to say that with confidence.
So now we have a full year of data, having rolled this out over the last couple of years, but our work to improve the process doesn't stop. We're continuing to make adjustments, engage with partners, the foundation team, to really refine the process and how we're collecting data from partners to make sure it's as easy and it's as easy of a process as it can be. We're also building in more opportunities for partners to share lessons from their projects to learn even more about on-the-ground delivery and to help contextualize more of that data coming in. This data is also, something that we seek that can really support the sector and identify common areas of success or challenges, and help inform the foundation more around how they want to strengthen their support in the sector.
Yeah, and then the second point for shifting from collecting data to actively using it to inform strategy, grant priorities, and sector engagement. And so this work that we've done so far is really the starting point to build off of. And so now we want to bring those insights into our future strategic planning, but also eventually back to partners as well for that ecosystem learning and sharing as well.
Okay, and I'll just speak a little to the last point. So our next focus, bringing insights back to partners to strengthen shared learning and data capacity in the sector. So now that we've done a lot of that internal work to build this evidence strategy and feel kind of confident in what we're hoping to learn, we want to build the capacity of partners to continue to share with us quality data and to do that learning as well. And so the foundation has been thinking about what would be needed to build the capacity of their partners. So we have a few ideas here as to what that could potentially look like. I know there was many people who said that they were part of service organizations. As a service organization, what could your funders do to support you in learning about the data that you're collecting? And if you're a funder, what would you consider exploring doing to support your grantees' capacity? This is something the foundation and Blueprint has been thinking a lot about, and we do have a lot of resources around this, but we are really hopeful to also learn here in this room. And so I'm going to ask you that you go back into Menti, and we're not going to look at the results in detail right now, but feel free as we continue through the presentation to maybe think about that so that we could use today as an opportunity to learn from one another. And I am just going to switch to the Menti so I can make sure that you guys are all able to access it, and then I'm going to switch it to you. So I'm just going to go up there. Okay, so you should be able to answer it. We're not going to look at the results right now. We're going to save that for later, but feel free to add your thoughts as Mitch and Florian are presenting. Oh, that is from the last one. Excellent. That's why we're doing this together. Okay, so there you guys go. you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit about the Homelessness Reduction Innovation Fund. So one of the ways that the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness is leading the way on outcomes-based reporting and projects is through this fund. So really quick, just going to do a bit of review to reinforce the differences between activity and outputs-based measurements and outcomes-based measurements. And like Kelsey was saying earlier, anything that's activity-based, output-based tells us what was done, but not what has changed. So units funded, amounts spent, whereas outcomes-based is measuring the result, like, for example, successful moves to housing. So an outcomes-based project uses data to meaningfully set a goal, track progress, and ideally share the results. What we're really trying to do is demonstrate the impact in order to make a change. And we know that we're in a reactive sector. We're used to crisis mode. And I was actually in a session earlier this week that compared data to kind of a crystal ball in where you can see the past and upcoming obstacles. So using your data is really essential to get out of crisis mode. So a bit more about what the Homelessness Reduction Innovation Fund is. It's a fund administered by us. It's one-time grants for innovative, data-driven projects aimed at achieving measurable reductions in homelessness. And we do also offer some one-on-one guidance to communities on their initiatives. Part of it is also sharing successful approaches with communities across the country for that shared learning, scalability, so folks can also put in place projects they know that work. HRIF is also part of the federal government's commitment to reaching home, Canada's homelessness strategy, announced in Budget 2024. So a bit about the process and eligibility. An expression of interest is normally used to assess eligibility and project suitability. And based on the responses, then we invite communities to complete an application. To be eligible, communities outside Quebec must be reaching home community entities for the designated community, the Indigenous homelessness stream, and or territorial homelessness stream, or the community lead organization participating in Built for Zero. For organizations that aren't CEs, we do suggest getting in contact with them to collaborate on a project and doing it through there. So communities must also be able to demonstrate that their project is aimed at reducing homelessness by either increasing move-ins to housing, or decreasing inflow for a target population. So it has to be specific, and the communities also have to be able to demonstrate that they've reached quality by name data criteria. That way we know for sure that the reductions that they see are reliable. So again, it's about shared learning, building capacity, and making the work visible. So communities are sharing data with us monthly at minimum to track the projects and how things are going. They're also sharing their learnings, outcomes, any other project data, and then we will share those out more broadly. I'm gonna get a bit into setting your outcomes or setting your aim, essentially. So like we can see on the picture here, the person on the side is saying, hey, our process is extremely efficient. And then we have someone pointing out how they're going in a circle. So this is where you can get out, like I was saying, of that crisis mode by using your data to find a clear path forward and structure your decision making. Also, because as funders, we need to know that the impact of the aim you're trying to have is data informed and has a clear rationale. So this can mean, for example, using data to explain why a certain data point was selected, and then using it to show the potential impact of your project, or on the flip side, what would happen without the project, how things would go status quo, right? So here I'm going to give an example aim from a successful application. Well, I changed some things a bit, but so the example here is that for their project, their aim was to reduce the number of people returning from housing, as evidenced by remaining at or below our previous 6-month median for two for at least 9 to 12 months between the start and the end of the project. So here again, we see that it is very specific to the median that they've had before. It's also time bound, and one quick way that folks can try to remember things when they're setting up a good aim is that it must be specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, and time-bound. So SMART, essentially. And then in their aim, they go on to say that reaching this project aim would reduce chronic inflow by 50 to 100%, with projections showing that they could achieve a functional zero within by the end of their project or June 2026. So they also show where they could go with that. And then the example rationale. Here they say, for example, that in 2023, 2024, a total of 40% of the clients in their by name data were returns from housing. And that on average, between April to December 2024, 55% of their chronic inflow was also folks who returned to the system. So based on their 6-month median data, they go on to kind of calculate the inflow, outflow, net change. So essentially, this is them saying why this data point, this reduction goal, would have the biggest impact. And next, they even go on to say, to go deeper, and sorry, pardon me. So assuming a net decrease, this is where they've also calculated that if they decrease from 13 in February 2025 to just 1 by February 2026, that this is how they could get to that functional zero. So all of this shows how thought out the project is. And one big thing that is also important throughout these projects is connecting the data at every step. Like I said, the goal is not more reporting. It's shared learning and demonstrating the impact for change through building capacity so organizations can use the data meaningfully, using data as a tool to see what's working and where more support is needed, and making the work of reducing homelessness visible and more connected. So that really means connecting data at every step. And now I'm going to pass it over to Mitch to demonstrate more about the tools we've built for the HRIF projects.
All right. Those were some fantastic speakers, and now you're stuck with me. So, first thing I just wanted to share and clarify. So we work with 62 communities across Canada, including some very big communities that you would know, Ottawa, for example. We have 49 communities right now who are at quality by name data, and I believe 59 who are submitting data to us. It's growing quite rapidly, and the movement continues to grow. So those communities, they submit this data to us on a monthly basis. It's aggregate data, inflow data, active homeless data, and outflow data. It's at the subpopulation level, you can look at youth, seniors, Indigenous. At the population level, we receive chronic data, or all homeless, which is really just non-chronic, or veteran data. So we already received this data from communities, and we have been receiving it since 2017. So what we're building with HRIF, the data infrastructure we're building, is really leveraging an existing framework that we've already built for communities. So communities that work with us, after they submitted data, I'm going to do the same trick I did in day one. After they submitted data to us or shared data with us, monthly aggregate data through a digital job form, how many minutes until they can get a dashboard, Zara? Okay, 5 to 10 minutes. So we're really leveraging the scale of the movement, and basically our data team, the 4 of us, soon to be 5, it's a team for the nation where we can build these things and share them across the country. So anybody participating in the movement gets a dashboard. And part of these dashboards are 3 pages right now that support the Homeless Reduction Innovation Fund projects that we've developed over the past year that we're fairly excited about. The first thing that the pages do is they enable real-time project tracking. So I can get into that a little bit. So as I mentioned, the communities are already submitting this data to us, so we're just leveraging existing data that already exists. There is supplemental reporting throughout the project and qualitative reporting, but the core of the project and the goals are built around the legacy data. So project-specific trends are visualized on a dashboard in real time. So this is a look at one of the actual pages. At the top, you can see project name, housing initiative approach. This is for a fictitious community, Mapleville. In the future, we imagine that communities will have many projects that you'll be able to select through this drop-down. Right now, it can support multiple HRIF projects, so it'd be very easy for us to expand this to include other improvement projects. So if you're in the room and you've worked with us before and you've done an improvement project, you could probably expect to be able to measure it through this technology in the future. So this project in particular, this example, is a project that focuses on move-ins of the chronic population into housing. So the top visualization there supports better understanding around that. So I think we all understand that green is good. So the green data points are actually indicating that for that month, you actually moved more people into housing than you had on average in previous months. So we're able to set a project baseline based on the data points. So we're able to say, in this example, at a baseline of 80, communities move 80 people into housing on average over 12 months before the project. So that's the baseline. So if they're able to beat that and beat their goal, their monthly goal is 85, their data point will be green. If they're able to beat their baseline but not meet their goals, it'll be yellow. And if they don't meet it, they'll be red. So at the bottom, you see active homelessness of chronic total population. So the idea is we don't just want to improve the metric that you're focused on, we also want to have an improvement for the overall population. Because you could be moving a lot of people into housing, but you might have a lot of inflow as well. So offsetting it, right? So you need to track both things at once. So I can appreciate if you're not a data person or data lover, this may seem unnecessarily complicated. But what we've done on the bottom is we've actually included a projection. This one, it's not a well-defined line, but basically the premise is we look at the year-over-year change in active homelessness for that population for the year before the project. So think if there's a growth rate of 1,000 people a year in your community for active homelessness, for chronic homelessness, and you do an improvement project, if you can get that down to 500, it's a significant improvement, right? So we're basically trying to add the ability for you to communicate the impact of your projects effectively to as large of an audience as possible. So historically, far too often, projects are actually evaluated just based on whether they can have a reduction in active homelessness. But again, if you're in that growth environment, we understand that that's extremely difficult. So this visualization should help you communicate to people that yes, you had an impact. You bent the curve, right? You were able to slow the growth rate through your improvement project. So real-time insights. By having access to the data in real time, communities can see what's going on, making it easier to determine issues, causes, and ultimately solutions. This way, they can pivot and apply learnings quickly. So again, another fictitious example, but this project, you can see a lot of red. So the goal is not to be in a situation where you're reaching the end of your project and realizing that you didn't have the impact that you thought you would have. So communities that receive HRIF funding work with a coach, and they're able to see in short order that, hey, they're not meeting their targets right at month 1. So then you can begin to have those conversations month 1, month 2, month 3, and you can pivot your approach. You don't have to invest in a losing strategy throughout the year. I mean, there's nuance to that, but there's power in having the numbers at your fingertip in real time. Okay. Now the part that I'm most excited about, so real-time scalability. So the dashboards that we've created also include pages to browse other communities' projects. We're at the early stages of this. Everything works technically, but the idea can really be expanded. So you can actually click on anybody's individual project through a visualization, and you can actually see in real time information about that project. It's visualized on a visualization that shows the various dots. And in the future, we'll include qualitative information about the projects. The power of that is that eventually we'll have a catalog of improvement projects that communities can access, along with data, a common measurement framework. So they'll be able to see the impact of the projects with data. They'll be able to learn about the projects with qualitative information. And they'll be able to take that, hopefully with an actionable template, to funders to be able to say, look, this project was successful in a different community. It's very much like our community. We work with a coach already, an improvement advisor. We'd like to implement this in our own local context. And so I hope that this will trigger a lot more funding, a lot more projects across the country. And you know, if you're going to relaunch a project, why not measure it on the framework again? Just contribute back, share the knowledge. And ultimately, we'll have a big catalog of improvement projects that we can all learn from and move forward together. Okay, last thing. I just want to make the point of how powerful data really is. So we have, as of Friday, October 24th, 2025, 100,020 moves to housing recorded through our movement. So I've already said this if you've seen the presentation on Monday, but I'm going to say it again for some of the new folks. But I just want you to think for a second. That's the number of times that somebody has been recorded moving into housing, having a new opportunity in their life, having their life changed. I want you to think, what would Canada look like had we not moved 100,020 people into housing? So these are the kind of things that we need to communicate across the sector, to people outside of the sector, to politicians. Yes, we're learning. Yes, we're improving. We're getting better. But without the sector, Canada would look very different. Thank you all for your work. Appreciate it very much.
Can we have, okay, the microphones work? Yeah. Awesome.
Okay, it's easier to see than this. Okay, hello, is it working? Yes. Okay, so for our insights and lessons learned, the first we have flexibility and learning can coexist. So trust-based approaches don't have to come at the expense of learning. Flexibility builds trust and creates the conditions for partners to share more openly, but really leading to stronger relationships and better evidence of what's working.
Okay, awesome. And building data capacity creates visibility and confidence. When partners can collect and use meaningful data, it shows what's changing and helps build confidence to act. So we really want to consider, what are we asking grantees, partners to be collecting? Do they have the capacity to collect that data in a quality, meaningful way? Does it reflect what's happening? We know what's happening is important, but how do we actually learn from it? How do we speak to it? Data, and I think Florian spoke to this, it's not neutral to just collect everything. There are real people on the other side of this. And so we really want to be intentional. I think both of these funders have been really intentional about thinking about not only what do we collect, but how do we engage those who are closer to the ground in understanding what can we learn to continue what is working, and where it's not working, learn from it to do better. And that really does require visibility, which is data capacity ultimately. So, yeah.
Yeah, third point, funders as learning partners enable shared action. So we want to shift from compliance to shared learning surfaces, surfacing insights and strengthening coordination and progress across the system. So we really can't afford to just continuously collect data for reporting purposes and not turning it into action. So we're doing everything we can to change our infrastructure to support you with that and to empower one another. So thank you so much.
And with that, we'll open it up to questions. There's a microphone in the middle. Feel free to come up. Et si vous avez des questions en français, on va les prendre aussi. Je vais juste traduire pour les présentateurs.
And in the meantime, we'll pull up our Mentimeter, the last one that we put up. See what everyone responded with.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, is that working? Yeah. It might not have actually worked when I put it up there, so that's completely okay. That's probably our bad on a technical piece. So if you haven't already, if you could go into Menti and add your comments, we'll just get insight into what you're thinking. Alternatively, you can also come up with a question or a comment around this.
Hello.
Oh, yeah, you can take it. You can take it if you'd like.
Tippy toe. Thank you so much. My name is Lauren. I work at a private family foundation. So we're in the process. Actually, Kelsey, we spoke earlier this year. It's fascinating to understand that process of sort of theory of change development, KPIs, and supporting our organizations collect their data better. I think all very much aligned with where we want to go. On the term of sort of name-based data collection and sharing that with broader systems, that for us raises some flags about buy-in from participants and beneficiaries and confidentiality. And on the one hand, I can respect that that can be very useful and powerful, but we also are, these are people who might not have a lot of trust in systems. And so how do we balance those trade-offs of privacy and buy-in for sharing, personal level data, and what's the need to sort of collect that and aggregate that at a bigger level? Thank you.
Okay. Yes, so just to clarify, we do receive aggregate data from the communities. So it's aggregate data points, it's a count. We don't receive person level data. I have a background in data science, so I do know about the de-identification process, and actually in our first session, we had an Indigenous person come up to me and say, we really want de-identified individual level data to tell the stories that we're trying to tell, because the aggregate data is valuable at the system level, but it's too simple. So there is, that's one person, but we know there's a lot of demand for that, and thinking about the kind of stories that we can tell with de-identified data, it is important as a sector that we learn to move in that direction. We are interested in moving in that direction, but you have to do so very carefully. You have to do so with a clear understanding that if you de-identify a person, you do so correctly so that they cannot be re-identified, right? For instance, if you remove somebody's name, but you describe somebody, you say that the corner that they stay on, their age and several other factors, it's pretty easy to piece together that that's John who's on this corner, right? But you can do so intelligently so that you have such a big number that you could never trace it back to an individual. Hope that answers your question.
And maybe I can add to that a bit too. The reason that we call it by name data is because it is the list, if you will, or database, if you will, that a community uses to primarily match folks to housing and resources. So folks directly working with them will have that information, but exactly on our end, what is shared with us is strictly aggregated, and exactly we don't need to know names, details, etc. And we were actually having a conversation earlier too about how exactly collecting data, and a lot of data isn't always neutral. So we want to make sure that anything we are getting or suggesting folks to collect has a reason behind it, is actionable, and is also collected in a way that won't perpetuate any harms or discrimination at the same time.
I would just quickly add as well that is absolutely the approach that we take at Blueprint too, always encouraging the minimum amount possible to serve the need that you have. So that's kind of how we've approached it with the foundation as well. We only get aggregate data. There's no reason for the foundation to need to know that, but totally see the value. There is a value at the service delivery level to perhaps have and use that data differently. So that's how we've been approaching it.
I just had a quick question about by names list data and how communities are utilizing the by names prioritization list from a data collection standpoint versus a service providing standpoint. So in our community, I think we're one of the only unfunded agencies at the by names list table, and I think what happens is service providers believe that what they're doing is putting people on for services for the by names list, not recognizing that the data collection is another primary component. So I'm just wondering, like, what work could be done to educate communities to be able to present those lists in a way that the service providers understand what they're doing when they're actually putting people on the by names list, so that they don't just put them on and leave people there to float, because that is oftentimes what I believe is occurring, just out of confusion more than anything.
No, thank you so much for sharing that, and I'd love to have a conversation afterwards regarding your specific community too. Everybody's at a different stage across the country, right? So when communities first start working with us, they're not considered at quality by name data. So they have to go through a verification process with our coaches, and sometimes that can take months, that could even take years to get to that point. So when we say that a community is at quality by name data, we found this whole process where we believe that the data that we have represents 90% or greater of the individuals experiencing homelessness in the community. So we have the system in place, but I'm hearing what you're saying, that you know there's potential for education and to get everyone on board to really understand when you're entering this data, it's not just an administrative thing. You're actually giving the number that's getting rolled up to paint the national picture, to make the decisions. I mean, on the first day of the conference, we talked about the impact that CAEH has had over the years. We really have had a tremendous impact, a lot of it behind the scenes and a lot of advocacy and changing of policies and encouraging investment. But that's because of the data that's being rolled up. So yes, I agree we need to communicate that to everyone, frontline workers, the entire sector. It would be interesting to develop better tools for people who are new to the sector to understand very quickly, like just a quick course, to understand what their data entry actually does. And so we'll see what happens, but thank you very much.
A couple things that I've seen be really helpful too in getting engagement around, we'll say like data collection, I guess, even though it's much more than that, is sharing the results, because it's also showing all the work that like a frontline worker does. It's showing them back, you housed 5 people, 15 people, you've had this big of an impact and this many lives. I've seen it be really helpful, and also tying it back to the stories, right? Because it's how we can show how, I'm going to lose my words here, talking about, you know, how important it is to go back to that human piece and that it's not just numbers. And I think that's always a good way to also connect on that level. And yeah, before I lose more of my words, I'll pass it off if anyone wants to add anything. Yeah.
No, data is the voice of people with lived experience. It really is. But it should be combined to be have maximum effectiveness. It should be combined with an example whenever possible. So it's a difficult thing to do, right? But even just telling one or several or a dozen stories and attaching a number to it, that's pretty powerful, right? So hopefully we again move in that direction.
Hi, thank you for the presentations. I'm Vaibhav from Fred Victor in Toronto, and I represent the data quality and research team, actually, which is a new foray for our organization. And I feel like more and more organizations are moving towards having outcomes, having data, having data to support their impact. And I don't think anyone in this room disagrees one of the insights that you shared today about building data capacity and how important it is to build data capacity. My question is around the how of it. Is there resources available? Is there funding available? How do we build data capacity in organizations?
I can comfortably take that question since that's my entire job. So at Blueprint, we think a lot about how to build data capacity for nonprofit organizations with the resources constraints in mind. We know that often data work is happening off the side of folks' desk, and it is becoming something that is, popular and interesting to talk about, but there isn't necessarily, and it's great that in your case there is, staff time that's dedicated to that role, but perhaps that's somebody that's either coming in from a very technical or like corporate world, and they have those skills, and they don't necessarily have the bridge into how this is applied in the nonprofit sector, or perhaps perhaps it's someone who's been in the nonprofit world and is really curious about how to do data work, but doesn't necessarily have those skills. And so what we do at Blueprint is we kind of bridge those two pieces together. How does data work actually show up in the nonprofit world? So I will do a little plug, I guess. So Blueprint, we have a website, buildingdatacapacity.com. We have free resources for nonprofit organizations. We are currently running a free workshop series where we talk about how do you create something like a theory of change for your organization a little bit higher level, a little bit more accessible. Again, we are thinking about the time constraints that organizations have, just to understand what is the right data that you would need to collect to actually learn. So we're never encouraging that you go out and collect everything. We want you to think really meaningfully about it. I have a lot of trust and faith that frontline staff do actually know what's happening, but we want to Mitch's point, document that. We want to add to those stories. And so we have developed this, we have developed tools and workshops, and we actually are launching office hours where you can talk to us one-on-one about what are the problems that you're facing, what are the questions that you're experiencing with data capacity. So whether you're a funder or a organization, please come up to me afterwards. I will share with you the link so that you can access those free resources. It is being funded by the Future Skills Center, so take advantage of that. We would be very happy to help you out.
Yes, and something I would add is that it's been really great working with the Home Depot Foundation, because it's something that's very top of mind for you as well, as we think about how we start to now mobilize this outward, since we have, the first part of this has been really about setting up the internal capacity and processes, but now that we're kind of figuring that out, it's always evolving. We're not done, but we're in a better place now to start actually thinking about that, and it's why it's a really important question for us now. And this partnership has been really great to think through how the Home Depot Foundation can do that as well, and leverage the tools and kind of deploy the tools that Blueprint has. And we see some really interesting and cool ideas here too that I'm excited to look through.
Yeah, I can add, I've seen up there like earmarking funding for evaluation, specific funding to be used to build capacity, and that is something that we're looking at as well, of course, with Blueprint support. Just knowing that this is a need for the nonprofits and charities that we support, and so we are actively looking at how we can support some of those costs through our grant programs as well.
Yep.
Hi, I'm with Québécois here in Montreal. Thank you for the presentation. So I wasn't going to ask this, but I couldn't resist. Sometimes with data, what happens is if you put the wrong metrics out there, it generates the wrong kind of behavior. So I'm just wondering, in the creation of your databases, do you consider the uses of data and the potential negative impacts on behavior, if any?
I'd love to start. Okay.
I'm going to sit back down.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely. Great question. Yes, we spoke about this, or I spoke about this on day one, about how important transparency is for the movement in general, but specifically right now. So we're seeing a lot of non-housing first, non-data-driven approaches to homelessness, let's call them that are appearing across U.S., in Canada, and pockets as well. So it's up to us to really have great information, to tell the story of our work, and it never pays to hold back data. So I had an anecdote in day one where I was basically asked to hold back data once from an analysis I had done 2 weeks into the sector that showed that there was 100% year-over-year growth in my community. And the problem was that didn't align with the goal to end homelessness in my community. So somebody was surprised, basically shocked, that that was the case. They thought that they were on track, but basically we had been building so much supportive housing that was generating so much outflow, but there was no plan to continue that. So they were completely caught off guard. Now, I got approvals, but I told everyone I could find because it wouldn't have helped. Eventually, they would have found out that they weren't going to be successful. So I was able, through my analysis, to tell them early. So yes, it was bad news. It's not what they wanted to hear, but they needed to hear it. And as a movement, We need to own the facts. It's a very difficult environment. We've had a very difficult few years, but we've also generated, as you saw, over 100,000 move-ins into housing. We've done a lot. So telling that story is important. And if the data isn't what you want to see, you got to learn from it. Learn from it. Own it and learn from it.
Yeah, great question. Where are you there? No, great question. I think data should be thought of as a type of intuition. It should really tell you what is the truth, like what is happening. And so if the data feels wrong, it might be a situation of like bias or the way that it is collected, perhaps, going back to like the data capacity piece, if we aren't getting quality data, we can't necessarily trust that data. We can't then use that data. And if we're collecting data and not using it, that builds a lack of engagement with the data. So it's going to continue to be poor quality data. And so we really have to engage with data as an opportunity for learning, not seeing it as, bad data is like failure, for example. There's a gap that needs to be addressed. So there are so many different methods to sort of check your bias and like make sure that the data that you're collecting is actually reflective of what's happening on the ground. I can absolutely speak to, how to bring in community into like taking a look at the data and sharing it back is incredibly important with your grantees. Seeing how they fit into the wider picture is sometimes important to just get a sense of, does this feel right? Does this resonate? I think that's why we like to ask a lot of questions too. But data is not something that we should collect and keep. We absolutely need to share it back so that it can become this healthy feedback loop where we are continuously updating it and making sure that it is, accurately reflecting what's going on so that we can continue to see those gaps and respond to them.
Great question. It really was. Thank you. Stop focusing on a laundry list of activities. Sounds good.
Yeah, noted.
Did you want to speak to some of those? I can speak to those.
Sure.
Have you heard of the, oh, go ahead. Sure, there's more. Yes, absolutely. I was going to say regarding the laundry list, the KISS principles, right? Keep it simple, stupid. Okay, scroll down. Yes. Oh, just the one. Okay, so should I just start picking them off? Okay, the bottom, the funder should ask questions like, what are your success stories? How do you plan to apply what the data is telling you? What adjustments do you need to make to improve outcomes? Yeah, that's a great comment. Exactly.
Yes, and one that we're very aware of right now, so I'm glad to see that there. Tells us that we're on the right track.
Yeah, and I can add, I mentioned that we use our application software for some reporting historically before looping in Blueprint, and that's really where we ask for, those qualitative questions of share us some success stories, share some learnings, maybe something worked or something you thought was going to work didn't work out. That doesn't mean that we're going to stop funding this program. It's just a good learning for us. I think both of you were speaking to this a lot as well, in just terms of how we can speak to other funders or other partners of, hey, have you thought of this? And, be kind of that connector, because we definitely don't want our reporting to be just compliance-based. Yes, they did what they said they were going to do or not, but really learning it as a learning opportunity for us. And I can also add, just in terms of us being able to collect the data, we're really looking like at an ecosystem level as a funder, and we don't have access to the individual data that's submitted from partners. So I think that just helps with some of the trust and maybe some of the concerns that are coming from our charitable partners too about how we are using the data, which is part of a lot of the work that we've done in setting up this work so that they understand how we are using it. But I think that just adds a bit of a lens as well too, that we're really looking across streams, overall impact, and not necessarily this one program, versus another at this stage, certainly.
Okay. How the change theory and the strategic plan works together to better collect data for both donators and the service providers, nonprofit organizations.
How the theory of change and strategic plan work together. Yeah. Yes, so we have our strategic plan, and it is, I think it's available online. Either way, you can send me an email. Maybe we'll go back to the last slide. Either way, you can send us a note by finding our email on our foundation website page. And I'd be happy to send you our strategic plan. But that was really, I would say, like a high level, how are we investing in solutions? And that's really where we came with those three kind of strategic priorities. But the theory of change is that kind of how and how we're measuring the impacts that we're having related to those strategic priorities, but then also from the youth level, the ecosystem level. I'm forgetting one, but yes.
Yeah, because this seems like more of a question. Having the theory of change linked to the strategic plan, and having a theory of change that really gets at like why. So not just there's how, like how do we get from like the problem we're trying to address to the impact that we're trying to have? What are the steps along the way? It kind of fills that middle part like Kelsey spoke to. But it also forces you to think through like why you think that what you're doing is going to get you there. So making sure that, and this is such like a foundational piece for any kind of evaluation or data collection. If you're going to, really to get really granular, I guess it makes it easier to map back and identify what data you would need to actually learn about whether you're making progress. So that has been a really important tool for us to just identify what data we actually need and what data we don't need to answer these questions. And so since that theory of change is really linked to the strategic plan in that way, that's kind of how we've used it to determine what we're really measuring.
Okay.
The rest we can probably just read off.
Sometimes the activities required are incredibly cumbersome. Identify 2 or 3 outcomes or areas for impact. Lengthy TOCs with hundreds of activities is daunting. Yeah, I think that's basically one of the big takeaways from the presentation. We don't want to measure hundreds of different activities. We want to measure the ultimate outcomes. Any thoughts? Good on that? Okay. By linking research and academia, data collection and frontline practice, funders can foster shared learning that informs better policy and strategic decisions. Totally agree. So as we, I hope, move into this space of collecting de-identified data from existing systems that are already operational, so again, not reporting, taking from operational systems, doing it ethically, we have the ability to really hone our learning. And then academics, it's a whole, the field opens right up. They can begin to do analysis and understand what actually influences more specific outcomes. So for example, diversion. If you wanted to improve your diversion success rate, maybe there's an academic study about that. If we're able to measure diversion across the country, then that gets unlocked, right? So very excited about that. Other thoughts? Specific funding to be used to build capacity to be able to collect quality data in order to apply for larger amounts of funding. Okay. Heard? Go for it. Yeah.
I talked about it a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, data capacity is important. Even though we're using economies of scale and we have a hub and spoke model where communities are submitting data to us and we're building the data infrastructure and sharing it back, I'll be very clear, I don't think that we should ever absorb the roles of the community. I don't think we could if we tried, but we never should try. You need to have local experts who understand your individual data better than we ever could at the top level, but we also have to have a great system that rolls the data up to the top level for that system level advocacy and change, those really, really big plays. Ability to submit proposals for grants that would support expanding existing programs versus new programs with data efficacy to support expansion. It's a great comment. Do you guys want to take that one?
happily. And I can also plug that our Youth Opportunity Grants will be opening in March. So that is something, because we are a flexible funder for that grant stream, that's definitely something that we would allow applying for. Whoever said that, please apply.
Okay. By name counts for youth and ethics approval. So, do you want to go for that?
I was wondering if for by name counts, do they mean like a point in time counts, or they mean like by name data for this one?
Maybe I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think it's important to count everyone, right? If we don't count people, again, we said data is the voice of people with lived experience. If we don't count people, I don't think it does justice to what's happening to them in their lives. So, but we can, obviously youth is a very sensitive group, so you don't want to be over surveying youth. In a past life, I was working with the Boys and Girls Club, and yeah, there's a whole different level of rigor before you would ever survey youth, being very, very careful. Can you speak to that potentially as the Home Depot, or is it too detailed?
I don't think we're tracking that.
Yeah, we're not.
Okay.
We do not track by name data.
Yes, so fair enough, Okay. Hopefully that was a decent answer for you. Earmarking funding for evaluation and data capacity building based on where the grantee is at along their journey.
Yeah, that's kind of like the other one.
Yeah. Okay. Ability to submit proposals for grants that would support, oh, we've got that one already. Did we get everything?
I think we did.
Okay.
These are great. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the audience, and thank you again, presenters.
Thank you.
Thank you.